The War Council chamber on Viridian Prime hummed with nervous energy. I, Commander Vex Thalorix of the Galactic Coalition forces, stood before the holographic display showing Earth's pale blue dot. Such a small, insignificant planet, yet 3 of our most powerful fleets had already been reduced to scrap metal floating in space. How? I muttered. My 4 arms crossed in frustration. How does a species that only discovered faster than light travel 60 years ago keep defeating us? My aide, Lieutenant Zara Krelion, shuffled her tentacles nervously. Sir, perhaps we underestimated their tactical capabilities? I snorted, a sound that echoed strangely through my respiratory slits. Sarah, they still use projectile weapons, actual bullets. While we have plasma cannons and quantum disruptors, they're throwing chunks of metal at each other. It's like watching children play with sticks while we wield energy swords. The hologram shifted, showing the aftermath of the Battle of Proxima Station. Our mighty dreadnought Stellar Dominance lay split in half, while 3 small human frigates limped away victorious. The sight made my stomach acids churn. Sir, Sarah ventured carefully. Admiral Korax is requesting an audience. Admiral Korax, the Thraxian whose fleet had been obliterated near Jupiter just 2 weeks ago. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their military prowess. If humans could defeat him, what chance did the rest of us have? Send him in, I said, dreading the conversation. Korax entered with the distinctive heavy footsteps of his kind. His exoskeleton bore fresh battle scars and one of his 6 eyes was covered with a medical patch. He looked like he'd been through a meat grinder. Commander Thalorix, he began without preamble. We need to talk about the humans. Obviously, I replied, gesturing to the display showing our latest defeat. Your fleet lasted, 47 minutes? His mandibles clicked in what I assumed was embarrassment. 32 minutes, actually. But that's not the point. These humans, they don't fight like anyone else in the galaxy. I leaned back in my command chair, which creaked under my weight. Enlighten me, Admiral. What makes them so special besides their apparent immunity to common sense? Korax's remaining eyes focused on me with disturbing intensity. They're insane, Vex. Completely, utterly insane. Do you know what their commander did when my fleet surrounded their pathetic little convoy? Surrendered, I hope. He launched his cargo pods at my flagship. I blinked slowly. Cargo pods. Empty ones, filled with scrap metal and primitive explosive devices. While my sensors were tracking those decoys, his real ships flanked my formation from behind an asteroid field. But here's the truly mad part. Korax paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. He rammed his own damaged cruiser into my command ship's bridge. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of life support systems. What? I managed. Rammed it. Straight into the bridge. A human ship was already crippled, so their captain decided to use it as a guided missile. Who does that? What sane species sacrifices their own vessels intentionally? I felt a chill run through my circulatory system. The crew, evacuated to escape pods 30 seconds before impact, timed it perfectly. The explosion took out our primary command center and half our communications array. While we were scrambling to restore order, their remaining ships hit us with everything they had. Zara's tentacles had gone completely rigid. That's not how space combat works. Try telling them that. Korax's voice cracked with frustration. They don't follow the galactic rules of warfare. They don't establish proper battle lines. They don't request formal surrender negotiations. Well, they just adapt. Constantly. Mid-battle. I stood up and began pacing, my claws clicking against the metal floor. Give me specifics. What exactly are they doing that's so different? Korax activated his personal datapad, projecting tactical recordings into the air. Look at this engagement from last month. The humans were outnumbered 4-1 by Zalarian forces. Standard doctrine says they should have retreated or requested terms. The hologram showed a typical battle formation. Zalarian ships in perfect geometric patterns, their weapons synchronized for maximum efficiency. Then the human ships appeared. Watch this, Korax said grimly. The human vessels moved in what appeared to be complete randomness. They scattered like frightened insects, breaking every rule of coordinated fleet action. The Zalarians, naturally, began their methodical pursuit to eliminate them one by one. That's when things got weird. The fleeing human ships suddenly stopped running. Instead, they began weaving between the Zalarian vessels like they were dancing. Their weapons fire seemed sporadic, almost desperate. The Zalarians, confident in their superior numbers, closed in for the kill. Now watch their targeting patterns, Korax instructed. I leaned closer to the display. Say was the humans weren't shooting randomly after all. Each ship was targeting a different subsystem on the Zalarian vessels. South the weapons, not the engines, not the shields. They were hitting communication arrays, sensor clusters, and navigation systems. Saladeklas Mashro said, the humans weren't shooting randomly after all. They're not trying to destroy the ships, I realized. They're trying to blind them. Exactly. Within minutes, the Zalarian fleet couldn't coordinate their attacks. Each ship was fighting independently, stumbling around like drunks at a Regelian festival. That's when the humans revealed their real plan. The scattered human ships suddenly converged from multiple angles, their previously damaged vessels somehow functioning perfectly. They'd been faking their casualties, using damaged hulls and fake distress signals to appear weaker than they actually were. Impossible, Sarah whispered. The energy readings showed those ships were critically damaged. They were damaged, Korax confirmed. The humans just didn't care. They kept fighting with hull breaches, failed life support, and engines operating at 12% capacity. Their crews were literally wearing spacesuits inside their own ships and continuing to operate weapon systems manually. I sat back down heavily. That's suicidal. That's what makes them so dangerous. They don't consider retreat when any rational species would. They don't surrender when defeat is mathematically certain. They just keep fighting until they win or die trying. The tactical display showed the battle's conclusion. The Zalarian fleet, despite their numerical advantage and superior technology, had been systematically dismantled, not through brute force but through a combination of deception, improvisation, and what could only be described as controlled madness. There's more, Korax continued. After the battle, do you know what the human commander said when asked about his strategy? I shook my head. He said, "We didn't have a strategy. We just made it up as we went along." The silence that followed was deafening. Made it up? I finally managed. They made up military tactics in the middle of a space battle? Apparently.
And it worked better than anything our military academies have taught for the past 1,000 years.
I turned to Zara. Get me all available intelligence on human military history. Everything. While she worked, Korax and I studied the tactical recordings from various battles. Each engagement showed the same disturbing pattern. Humans would arrive at a conflict with what appeared to be standard military doctrine, then immediately abandon it the moment shooting started. They adapted to each situation in real time, often using strategies that seemed to violate the basic principles of warfare.
Here's something interesting,
Sarah announced, her tentacles manipulating multiple data streams simultaneously. Human military doctrine apparently includes something called thinking outside the box. The box? I asked. It's a metaphor for conventional thinking patterns. Humans are trained to deliberately ignore standard approaches and find unconventional solutions. Korax made a choking sound. They train their soldiers to disobey doctrine? Not disobey, Sarah clarified. They teach them to transcend it, to use it as a starting point, and then innovate beyond it. They stared at the data scrolling past. Human military history was filled with examples of forces defeating superior enemies through unconventional tactics, from something called guerrilla warfare to bizarre concepts like asymmetric strategy. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to win fights they should have lost. This explains everything, I muttered. We've been fighting them like they're any other civilized species, but they're not civilized, not by galactic standards. I searched for the right word. Creative, Sarah supplied. Dangerously creative, I corrected. Look at this data. They've been fighting wars among themselves for millennia. Not just territorial disputes, but ideological conflicts, resource wars, even something called religious crusades. They've had to develop strategies to fight enemies who knew all their previous tactics. The implications were staggering. While other galactic species had developed standardized military doctrines and stuck with them for centuries, humans had been locked in an evolutionary arms race of tactical innovation for their entire history. Commander, Sarah said urgently, I'm receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim Defense Fleet. I felt my circulatory system slow. What now? The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Vex Thalorix of the Hegemony Navy. His usually pristine uniform was singed, and his expression was grim. Thalorix, we have a problem. A big one. Let me guess. Humans. 3 human destroyers just penetrated our defensive perimeter around Kepler Station. They shouldn't have been able to do that. Our shields were at maximum strength. Our sensor arrays were operating at full efficiency, and we had a complete squadron of heavy cruisers on patrol. I closed my eyes. How many ships did you lose? That's the thing. We didn't lose any ships. They didn't attack us. My eyes snapped open. What? They flew right past our entire fleet, ignored our hails, and landed on Kepler Station. When we tried to intercept them, they transmitted a message. What kind of message? Kolos looked like he'd seen a ghost. They said they weren't here to fight. They said they wanted to talk. The chamber fell silent again. In 3 years of conflict, no human force had ever requested negotiations. They fought until they won or died trying. The concept of diplomatic discussion seemed alien to them. Talk about what? I asked. That's what's terrifying, Kolos replied. They want to discuss surrender terms. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. Our surrender terms? No, Vex. Theirs. The universe seemed to tilt sideways. Humans didn't surrender. It was one of the few constants we'd discovered about them. They fought impossible odds, used suicidal tactics, and never gave up. The idea of humans offering to surrender made no tactical sense. There's something else, Kolos continued. They've been broadcasting a message on all frequencies. They want every species in the Galactic Coalition to hear it. What does it say? See for yourself. The display changed to show a human male in what appeared to be a standard military uniform. He was middle-aged by their species standards, with graying hair and calm eyes. When he spoke, his voice was steady and confident. Greetings to the Galactic Coalition. I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We understand that our recent defensive actions have caused some concern among your member species. We'd like to address that concern directly. He paused, apparently organizing his thoughts. For the past 3 years, you've been testing our resolve. You've attacked our colonies, destroyed our trade vessels, and attempted to establish dominance over human space. We've responded defensively, protecting our territory and our people, but we think there's been a misunderstanding about our intentions. Another pause. I found myself leaning forward, fascinated despite the situation. You see, we're not interested in conquest. We don't want to rule the galaxy or subjugate other species. We just want to be left alone to develop our civilization in peace. However, if you continue to attack us, we'll be forced to respond more aggressively. The human's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes suggested steel underneath. So here's our offer. Complete withdrawal from human space. Recognition of our territorial boundaries. Establishment of formal diplomatic relations. In return, we'll share some of our tactical innovations with coalition forces. We think you'll find them useful for dealing with other threats. He smiled slightly, and it wasn't a friendly expression. If you decline this offer, we'll be forced to demonstrate why no army in galactic history has ever successfully defeated human strategic thinking. And trust me, you really don't want that demonstration. The message ended. I stared at the blank display for several minutes before finding my voice. They're bluffing. Are they? Korax asked quietly. After everything we've seen, are you really certain they're bluffing? I wanted to say yes. Every logical analysis suggested that humans, despite their tactical innovations, couldn't possibly threaten the entire Galactic Coalition. They had perhaps 200 ships scattered across a dozen systems. We had thousands of vessels and the industrial capacity of 50 worlds. But then I remembered the Battle of Proxima Station and the Jupiter incident, and a dozen other engagements where humans had achieved impossible victories through sheer creative audacity. Sarah, I said slowly, what's the earliest recorded example of human military innovation in their own history? She consulted her datapad. There are many examples, but one that stands out involves something called the Trojan horse. Approximately 3,000 of their years ago, human forces were besieging a city that they couldn't capture through conventional assault. So they built a large wooden horse, hid soldiers inside it, and convinced their enemies it was a religious offering. The enemy brought the horse inside their city walls, and the hidden soldiers emerged at night to open the gates for the main army. I felt my respiratory slits contract. They've been doing this for 3,000 years? Longer, actually. There are records of unconventional tactics dating back to their earliest written history. It seems to be a fundamental aspect of their species' approach to conflict resolution. The full implications hit me like a plasma bolt to the consciousness. Humans hadn't developed their tactical creativity in response to galactic warfare. They'd been perfecting it for millennia, before they ever left their home planet. We weren't fighting a species that had learned to think outside conventional military doctrine. We were fighting a species for whom unconventional military doctrine was the convention. "Commander," Zara said urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures in the Sol system. It looks like the humans are mobilizing their entire fleet." "How many ships?" That's impossible. Would the readings show over 2,000 vessels?" My heart stopped beating. 2,000? We estimated their total fleet strength at less than 300 ships. The additional vessels appear to be converted civilian craft, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even mining ships. They're all showing military-grade weapon signatures. Purse. I slumped in my chair. Of course they'd weaponize their entire civilian fleet. Why maintain the distinction between military and civilian vessels when you can turn every ship into a potential warship? It was exactly the kind of thinking that had been defeating us for 3 years. "What are your orders, Commander?" Korax asked. I stared at the tactical display showing 2,000 human vessels preparing to leave their home system. Each ship represented not just military capability but the creative potential of a species that had been innovating warfare for thousands of years. A species that treated military doctrine as a suggestion rather than law. A species that had turned adaptation and improvisation into an art form. "Get me a direct channel to Coalition High Command," I said finally. "I think we need to seriously consider the humans' surrender terms." "Sir?" Zara asked, confused. "They're surrender terms for us," I clarified. "Because if we keep fighting them, I'm beginning to suspect they're going to win." The communication array crackled to life, connecting me to the Coalition's highest military authority. In the background, I could see the human fleet beginning to move. 2,000 ships carrying the tactical legacy of a species that had never learned the meaning of impossible. As I waited for the connection to establish, one thought kept running through my mind. Why hadn't anyone warned us that creativity could be weaponized? The answer, I realized with growing dread, was that no one in galactic history had ever encountered a species creative enough to make it work. Until now. The emergency session of the Coalition High Command convened within 6 hours. Representatives from 47 species materialized as holograms around the massive circular chamber on Nexus Prime. I'd never seen so many worried faces in one room. And that was saying something considering half the delegates didn't actually have faces. Admiral Kress Vorblade, the Syndicate's supreme military commander, dominated the center platform with his towering presence. His species, the Damaki, were legendary for their strategic prowess. They'd conquered 12 systems using nothing but superior planning and overwhelming force. "Commander Thalorix," Vorblade's voice rumbled through the chamber's acoustics. "Explain to me how a species that discovered antimatter containment last Tuesday is threatening the stability of our entire military structure." I activated the holographic display showing the latest intelligence reports. "Sir, the humans have mobilized what appears to be their entire civilization for war. Every ship, every station, every asteroid mining platform has been converted into a potential weapon." "Impossible," interjected Ambassador Kix Thornweave of the Celestial Republic. Her crystalline form sparkled with agitation. "No civilization can sustain total militarization. Their economy would collapse within weeks." "That's what we thought too," I replied grimly. "But humans apparently don't follow economic theory any better than they follow military doctrine. They've implemented something called a war economy. Instead of their economy collapsing, it's actually grown stronger." I pulled up the economic data that our intelligence networks had gathered. They've converted their manufacturing entirely to military production. But instead of shortages, they're producing surplus goods. They're trading weapons and military supplies with neutral systems for resources they can't produce themselves. They've turned warfare into a profitable enterprise. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The concept was alien to everyone present. War was supposed to be expensive, resource draining, and economically devastating. The idea that a species could make it profitable violated every principle of galactic economics. "Silence," Vorblade commanded. "Continue your report, Thalorix." "The human fleet reached the outer edge of Coalition space 12 hours ago. They're not following standard approach patterns. Instead of massing for a concentrated assault, they've split into hundreds of small groups. Each group is taking a different route to different targets. Standard harassment tactics," commented General Rick Steelheart of the Iron Confederacy. They're trying to divide our response. No, sir, I corrected. That's what we thought initially. But their targeting pattern makes no military sense. They're heading for diplomatic stations, trade routes, and communication hubs. They're avoiding our military installations entirely. The implications sank in slowly. Several delegates began whispering urgently among themselves. They're not trying to fight us, I continued. They're trying to isolate us. If they control our communication networks and trade routes, they can cut off coordination between our forces without firing a shot. Ambassador Kix's crystalline form dimmed noticeably. That's not how interstellar warfare works. The humans apparently didn't read the manual, I replied with more sarcasm than was probably appropriate for a military briefing. Admiral Vorblade leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. What are our defensive options? Limited, I admitted. Our fleets are positioned to defend against conventional military assault. We have massive firepower concentrated around key military targets. But the humans aren't attacking those targets. I manipulated the display to show current fleet positions. To defend our communication networks and trade routes, we'd have to spread our forces across thousands of potential targets that would leave us vulnerable to concentrated assault if they change tactics. So we're faced with a choice, Vorblade mused. Defend everything and be strong nowhere, or defend our military assets and let them control the infrastructure that keeps our coalition functioning. That's correct, sir. It's a classical strategic dilemma, except the humans have created a situation where both choices lead to defeat. The chamber fell silent, except for the humming of the environmental systems. Sir, I ventured carefully. There's something else. We've intercepted additional human communications. They're not just planning military action. They're implementing what they call psychological warfare. Meaning what? Exactly. They're broadcasting propaganda directly to our civilian populations. Not threats or demands for surrender, but information about human culture, technology, and philosophy. They're trying to make themselves seem more appealing than the coalition government. General Steelheart's armored fist slammed into the podium. Civilian populations don't determine military outcomes. They do, if those populations stop supporting the military effort, I pointed out. Human intelligence services have identified discontent within several coalition member systems. They're exploiting those grievances. I activated another display showing the propaganda broadcasts. A human female appeared, speaking in perfectly accented Regalian. Citizens of the Rigel system. We understand your frustration with coalition taxation policies. Did you know that humans pay no interstellar taxes at all? We govern ourselves, manage our own resources, and keep all the profits from our own labor. The message continued, carefully crafted to appeal to Regalian cultural values while highlighting the benefits of independence from coalition oversight. They're doing this for every member system, I explained. Customized propaganda designed to exploit specific grievances and cultural preferences. They've somehow acquired detailed psychological profiles of dozens of species. Where did they get that information? Demanded Ambassador Cuse. We think they've been studying us for years. While we were focusing on their military capabilities, they were analyzing our political structures, economic systems, and social dynamics. The full scope of human strategic thinking was becoming clear. They hadn't just prepared for military conflict. They'd prepared for total war involving every aspect of civilization, economic, political, psychological, and cultural. Admiral, I said, addressing Vorblade directly, I believe the humans are implementing something they call grand strategy. It's not just about winning battles or even winning the war. It's about restructuring the entire galactic power balance in their favor. Explain. They don't want to conquer us. They want to make conquest unnecessary by making themselves indispensable. If they control communication networks, they become essential for interstellar coordination. If they control trade routes, they become necessary for economic stability. If they win the support of civilian populations, they become the preferred alternative to existing governments. The chamber erupted again, this time with genuine panic. The representatives were beginning to understand that they weren't facing a military threat. They were facing a civilizational transformation. That's impossible, shouted Representative Zek Mindbridge of the Psionic Collective. No single species can restructure galactic civilization. The humans apparently believe they can, I replied. And given their track record, I'm not inclined to bet against them. Sir, my aide Zara announced urgently. I'm receiving reports from across the coalition. Human forces have successfully occupied 17 communication hubs and 23 trade stations. No shots fired. The station personnel are surrendering without resistance. Why? Vorblade demanded. The humans are offering better working conditions, higher pay and guaranteed safety. Most of the station personnel are civilian contractors, not military. They're accepting human offers of employment. I felt my respiratory system slow to emergency levels. The humans weren't conquering territory, they were recruiting it. There's more, Sarah continued. Human negotiators are requesting meetings with local planetary governments. They're offering economic partnerships, technological exchanges, and mutual defense agreements. They're building their own coalition. I realized with growing horror, they're not trying to defeat us militarily, they're trying to replace us politically. The strategic brilliance was staggering. Instead of fighting the existing power structure, humans were creating an alternative that offered better terms to everyone involved. Why fight a war you might lose when you could win a peace that everyone preferred? Admiral Vorblade, I said formally, I recommend immediate acceptance of human surrender terms. What surrender terms? He asked, confused. The terms they offered us. Complete withdrawal from human space, recognition of territorial boundaries, and establishment of diplomatic relations. If we don't accept those terms now, I believe they'll offer much worse terms later, assuming they bother to offer terms at all. You're suggesting we surrender to a species we outnumber 50 to 1. I'm suggesting we negotiate with a species that has demonstrated the ability to win without fighting. Sir, they've been at war with us for 3 years, and we've never once forced them to retreat. Every engagement has ended in human victory or strategic withdrawal on their terms. I gestured to the tactical displays showing human forces spread across coalition space. Look at their current positions. They're not randomly scattered. Every group is positioned to control a critical resource or communication node. If they simultaneously take control of all those positions, they can effectively shut down coalition coordination and force individual systems to negotiate separately. That would take perfect timing and flawless execution, General Steelheart protested. Sir, these are the people who ram their own damaged ships into enemy vessels as a standard tactical maneuver. I don't think perfect timing and flawless execution are beyond their capabilities. As if summoned by my words, every display in the chamber suddenly changed to show the same human face. It was Admiral Jake Morrison again, but this time his expression was more serious. Coalition High Command, he began without preamble. I hope you've had time to consider our previous offer. Unfortunately, circumstances have changed somewhat. The chamber fell absolutely silent. As of 30 minutes ago, human forces have established control over 47 communication hubs, 63 trade stations, and 18 diplomatic facilities. We did this without firing a single shot, because the personnel at those facilities chose to accept our employment offers rather than resist. Morrison paused, letting the implications sink in. We're not invaders, we're recruiters, Ultra. We're offering every sentient being in coalition space the opportunity to join a more efficient, more profitable, and more peaceful way of life. So far, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I watched Admiral Vorblade's expression change from confusion to anger to something approaching panic. However, Morrison continued, we understand that change can be difficult for established power structures, so we're prepared to make this transition as smooth as possible for current coalition leadership. Here it comes, I muttered. We're offering immediate employment opportunities for any coalition military personnel who wish to join human defense forces. We're offering economic partnerships for any planetary governments that want to maintain their independence while joining our trade network. We're offering technological exchanges for any species that wants to benefit from human innovation. Morrison's smile was genuinely friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. The alternative, of course, is that we continue our current strategy until every critical system in coalition space is under human influence. At that point, the coalition will cease to exist not because we destroyed it, but because nobody will need it anymore. The transmission ended. The chamber remained silent for several minutes. Finally, Admiral Vorblade spoke. Commander Thalorix, in your professional opinion, what are our chances of military victory against human forces? I considered lying. I considered offering false hope or suggesting alternative strategies, but military officers are trained to deal with reality, not comforting illusions. 0, sir. We have no chance of military victory against human forces. Explain. Sir, we've been thinking about this wrong from the beginning. We assumed we were fighting a war. The humans are fighting something completely different. They're fighting for the future structure of galactic civilization. Every battle we win pushes more systems toward accepting human alternatives. Every battle we lose proves that their way is more effective than ours. I activated one final display showing the strategic situation across known space. Even if we managed to defeat their military forces, which I don't believe we can, we'd still lose. They've demonstrated that small, flexible forces using creative tactics can defeat large, conventional forces using standard doctrine. Every species in the galaxy has seen this demonstration. The military implications alone will change how everyone approaches warfare for the next 1,000 years. And if we don't fight them, then they get what they wanted from the beginning: independence for human space, recognition as a major power, and the right to offer alternatives to coalition members who aren't happy with current arrangements. Admiral Vorblade leaned back in his command chair. So our choices are lose a war or accept a negotiated peace. That's correct, sir. Except that the negotiated peace is looking better and better the longer we wait. How so? Sir, 12 hours ago, they wanted recognition and territorial boundaries. Now they're offering to hire our personnel and partner with our governments. If we wait another 12 hours, they might decide they don't need us at all. The truth of it hit everyone in the chamber simultaneously. The humans weren't just winning the current conflict. They were positioning themselves to win every future conflict by making conflict unnecessary. It was the ultimate strategic victory, winning so decisively that nobody wanted to fight you anymore. Thor. Very well, Admiral Vorblade said finally. Open a channel to Admiral Morrison. Let's discuss surrender terms. Sir, I corrected gently. I think we should discuss employment opportunities. As the communication array activated, I reflected on the lesson that humanity had taught the galaxy. War wasn't just about defeating enemies. War was about creating better alternatives to conflict. The humans had won not by being better fighters, but by being better at everything that made fighting unnecessary. 3 hours later, I was officially a consultant to the Human Defense Forces, helping them understand coalition military doctrine so they could improve it. My salary had tripled, my working conditions had improved dramatically, and I was genuinely excited about the future for the first time in decades. As I reviewed the integration plans for coalition forces into the human command structure, I couldn't help but smile. The humans hadn't just won the war, they'd made everyone grateful to lose it. That, I realized, was the most terrifying military strategy in galactic history. No army could survive against an enemy that made surrender more attractive than victory. The age of coalition dominance was over. The age of human influence had begun. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see what they thought of next.